put you on that microphone on the desk, but is that where you want it? If not, feel free to. Not there.
It's a Teams meeting, right? Everyone's name will be visible. The last one I spoke on the Teams meeting, but it doesn't matter.
Evening, Julie. It's James here. How you doing? should be now live, Chair.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Councillor Pounds and I'm the chair of this committee. I'd like to welcome you to the East Area Committee taking place on Monday the 13th of March at 6:30 p.m. I have apologies from Councillor Thornborough, Councillor Healy. Councillor Herbert hopes to attend, but he's returning from another meeting and may be late. The members present include Councillors Bagent, Bennett, Copley, Davey, Howard, Moore, Pounds, Robertson, Smith, and I think that's everybody. Have I missed anybody?
That's me as well, Councillor Bulat.
Of course, I'm just coming on to the county councillors because I've had my thumb over it. So we also welcome your county councillors, which is Councillor Bulat, Councillor Shaler, Councillor Howitt and Councillor Beckett. I think that's everybody now, hopefully. So the officers permanently at the table for this meeting are our Assistant Chief Executive, Andrew Lim, the committee manager, which is Chris Connor, and the meeting producer, who is James Goddard. If anyone has any problems hearing me throughout the meeting, please alert me through the chat. This meeting is being broadcast live via the council website, and public speakers are reminded that speaking and appearing in this meeting, you are giving consent to being recorded. The meeting is automatically recorded and will be available via the council's YouTube pages. The process for each agenda item will be that the relevant officer will give a brief introduction to their report. Councillors and members of the public participating in the meeting will be invited to type "speak" in the chat function if they would like to ask a question. Can I please ask that you do use the chat function? I'm working on a small laptop and I don't always see the yellow hands that go up. So use the chat function if you wish to speak. The committee manager will check with the Democratic Services email box from time to time to check if any public questions have been submitted, and will read these out if received. For the comfort councillors, I will call a break, so do just indicate in the chat if you would like me to halt the proceedings whenever convenient. Right, so we moving on to agenda item 2. If councillors could advise if they have any declarations of interest and identify which item their declaration relates to. And I would like to do that now because I'm the founding member of the Romsey Music Project on agenda item 5. Is there anybody else?
Yeah, Chair, I'm a member of the Cambridge Cycling Campaign.
Thank you, Councillor Bagent. I think that if you think of anything during the meeting, feel free to say at any point. So we're moving on to
yes,
agenda.
I'm also a member of CamCycle.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Smith. And Councillor Moore has her hand up.
Thank you. I'm the chair of Coleridge Community Forum, which is one of the applicants for the funds.
Thank you. And Councillor Copley has put in the chat. I did call out your name, Councillor Copley, and hopefully that's been recorded, but just to make sure. Thank you. So the minutes have been submitted to this meeting. Are there any concerns about the minutes of our previous meeting? Could you raise them now? Good, I think everyone's happy. There were a couple of item 4, couple of actions arising from the minutes. Councillor Bulat, you have a possible action. Do you have any update, please, on the this is on the discussion with the Combined Authority Mayor about a separate adult education centre in Cambridge as part of the Emerging Greater Local Plan.
Yes, I think as everyone here is aware, Mayor Nick Johnson just returned to work just a few days ago. So I'm sure we'll continue those conversations with Mayor Nick as well. But meanwhile, I had a meeting with Councillor Anna Smith, who is here on the call. So I'm not sure if Councillor Smith wanted to say anything on this item. We're still in discussions with various officers on this topic because there are many people to be consulted for opinion. I'm not sure if Councillor Smith would like to say anything on her side after our conversation.
Thank you, Councillor Bulat. Councillor Smith?
Yeah, just to say it was a really helpful conversation. I think we both are very keen to make sure that education and skills at all levels are properly serving all our residents in Cambridge, including those residents in Councillor Boulat's area. I'm certainly very committed to seeing what we can do there. I'm looking forward to having those conversations with Mayor Nick now he's back as well. I thought it might also be worth mentioning there have been some quite exciting initiatives across the Combined Authority area, including very recently some initiatives to get training out to places that don't have centres via learning buses. And I went to visit one the other week in Huntingdon that's going out into some of the regions, but it very much struck me that some of these things are equally relevant to parts of the city that don't have access as well. So certainly we'll be bringing back updates to future committees, but it was a really useful conversation, and I think we're both very keen to see what we can do.
Thank you very much, Councillor Smith. I just to also report on our meeting with Acorn. So I went along with Councillor Robertson, who is here. Unfortunately, Councillor Holloway had COVID and wasn't able to come along, but also Councillor Jerry Bird came over to Romsey, to Ross Street, and met the representatives of Acorn, which they very much appreciated. We had a lovely meeting. It was really useful, but also, you know, very engaging and interesting to hear the other side of the story. This is to do with private renters and HMO. We have some initiatives going forward with officers to try and help get more of these licensed. It is really difficult, and I think that actually it's something we as councillors can probably help with, when, particularly if we're canvassing, if we're meeting residents, because it's quite hard to identify HMOs. They're the sort of houses that don't tend to answer the door when we canvass often, or they're not registered to vote because a lot of them are from overseas, the residents. And so, I mean, I think there's something that we're going to have to really think about hard to try and see if we can reach these particular HMOs that are unlicensed. But we did hear some awful stories from Acorn about the conditions that people are living in. So it is something that we're really going to push to try and do something about.
Can I just add something to that?
Yes, please do, Councillor Robertson.
The Acorn people were very concerned that the register of HMOs was not available online. However, it is now online again.
Ah, brilliant. That's brilliant.
I gather
Good.
the whole system has been moved over to new software. That took rather longer than they had hoped, but it is now available, and you can look at it, look up licenses for all different sorts of types of license, taxis, alcohol, premises, all sorts of things. So it's all available online again.
Ah, that's really good news. Really good news. It makes a huge difference to them when they're looking for somewhere to live, if they can go and check that it is licensed where they're moving to.
Yeah.
Do we have any other matters arising from the minutes? Did anybody want to raise anything else? I'm not seeing anything in the chat, not seeing any hands. So if we're all happy, the minutes are approved. And now we're moving on to agenda item 5, which is area committee grants. And I'd like to welcome Julie Cornwell. Welcome, Julie. She's the community funding and voluntary sector manager, and she's going to give us a report on the latest round of the community grants.
Thank you, Councillor Pounds. So this report provides a summary of the area committee funding applications which have been received and assessed for consideration for the East Area Committee funding. As you would have read, the demand for funding for this area has been very high. We had £46,152 worth of requests against an available budget of £21,959. And we're recommending that the full £21,959 of awards are made, and they're listed in Appendix 1. It's been a challenging process, and our grants criteria have been rigorously applied to ensure the council funds have been awarded to those groups who submitted a strong application, demonstrating a good fit for our funding priorities and a high level of need. Following the publication of this report, all East Area applicant groups were emailed and sent the link to the agenda and this report, as is usual practice. Councillors were also invited to contact the grants team prior to this meeting if they wished to discuss any individual funding decisions. The rationale for specific funding applications will not be discussed this evening, recognising this is a public forum and it's not the most appropriate place to discuss and share sensitive or confidential information regarding a group, for instance around governance arrangements or financial status if that's not already within the public domain, or the quality of a group's application. Where a nil or reduced award has been made, this is due to one or more of the following reasons. The grant scheme outcomes and or priorities were not adequately met. There was poor or insufficient identification of need or understanding of beneficiaries was not well demonstrated. There were concerns around the quality or viability of the project. The activity was not targeted at beneficiaries living in a specific area of the city. The proposals were the remit of another service, fund or organisation. The organisation was ineligible. The inclusion were of inappropriate costs. For example, it may have been an equipment only request, and this is a revenue funding stream. The organisation did not demonstrate the beneficiaries couldn't fund the activity themselves, and the financial need of the organisation was not demonstrated, or there was an over-reliance on community grants funding. I should stress at this point that the activity which you can see on Appendix 1, which is labelled E15, the Romsey Music Project, we have actually been able to find some funding, £1,000 from this year's Community Grants Fund, as we had an underspend, and this activity is actually already happening. So I'm pleased to be able to advise you of that. And although initially, when assessed against such a huge number of really strong applications, we had considered making a nil award, we are really pleased to be able to recognise the value of this activity within the community this financial year. So very happy to take general questions. They're really helpful as they help inform future grant funding rounds. So yeah, perhaps back to you, Councillor Pounds, if that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julie. Would anybody like to ask Julie any questions? So I can see Councillor Bagent.
Yeah, shall I go?
Yes, please do. You're the only person at the moment.
I'd like to ask some questions about the C3 application and approval. Can I be told, is this food truck something that's been running for some time? If that will do for a starter, then I'll have some subsequent questions potentially.
Okay, it is something that's been running for a period of time. I can't tell you exactly how much time, unless I go back to the grant application itself, which I can do if perhaps at the end of this round of questions. It is the first time that they've applied to us, and they were able to demonstrate, for example, the number of beneficiaries that are currently attending, which is how I know that it is already running, because that they've been able to give us that information. I think the idea is that it's not sustainable without grant funding, and because of the cost of living crisis, the need is growing and the demand is growing, and they're not able to meet that need within their current financial position.
Yeah, can you further to that? Thank you very much for that. That was very useful. So is the funding paying for the van, and where does the van go? Where does it go to deliver food?
No, we wouldn't pay for such a large capital item as that, but we might pay for contribution towards some of the food. We might pay for volunteer expenses if they were modest and related to that specific activity. So that will be where a large portion of, and potentially some publicity. So yeah, it would be around those aspects. And again, I can have a look in more detail.
Yeah, because I mean, £5,000, quite a lot of money. Is that what I'm really interested in? Is that actually going on the food, or is that going on? You're saying it's not being used to run the van, but is that directly providing food? And is the van out and about in Cambridge, or does it park outside the church?
So I'm just having a look now. If you don't mind holding on
No,
a
that's
second, I'll
okay.
be able to
Thank you.
have a look. So the application is for room hire for the main kitchen and auditorium, some staff costs and for food. The food costs are for £5,000. So that's the majority of the funding. The van is located at C3. It's actually outside the church. It doesn't go around the city.
Right, so room hire. So is that room hire in their own building? They're charging this
A lot of potentially, yes. A lot of organisations do that. They recharge. We frequently fund as part of our application process. We allow groups to recharge, if you like. Yeah, I could name multiple groups where that happens.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Bagent. I did say about putting speak please in the chat. I can see some hands, but if I don't see your hand, you will need to tell me. So the next person I've got is Councillor Smith.
Yeah, just to say, Chair, at the moment the chat is not accepting comments. I tried to put something in and it just said you must add more people to contribute to the chat. So I don't know if our technical team is able to have a look at that, but at the moment the chat is not accepting the speak please comments, I'm afraid, hence the hand. So Julie, there's a couple of things here that and absolutely appreciating the fact that this has been a very oversubscribed round and you've had to make some very difficult decisions. There are some things here in Coleridge Ward, and I'm looking here particularly at E2 and E4, that I think people they will be quite disappointed that they haven't received funding, and absolutely appreciating the pressures on this pot, but I wonder if I could meet with you to talk about how we might be able to find funding for them from other sources, because I'm sure you've got a really good understanding of what other sources are out there, and I'd be very keen to have some conversations, get some advice from you so that I can pass that advice on to both Cambridge Online and onto the Bird Box Gallery.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'd obviously go back to every group with specific reasons and talk to them about that. I would just say in general terms with the Cambridge Online application, I meet with Cambridge Online regularly, as do my colleagues, and we've talked in quite a lot of detail about this proposed activity, and it sounds really interesting, and it is something that we might like to consider for an award next year. These are all pilots, and I think what we felt was that we'd like to see the results of that first, and then consider an award next year. They have actually successfully secured funding for at least 4 of these already. And the sort of very nature of pilots, I'd really like to just hold off and see the results of those 4 first. We did also advise that that a large focus of this application was around crime, and we felt that there could be other grant pots which would be much more kind of closely appropriate really to that activity, one being, for example, the Police and Crime Commissioner, and I believe they've had positive sort of engagement with them about that. So that's definitely not one that we'd rule out. In terms of Bird Box, just sort of general comments, and what I would say about that is that, as you know, we've funded this organisation for several years. The infrastructure is in place for these boxes and this programme to continue running. The maps are all established, the actual infrastructure, the wooden display points we've paid for in previous years, so there's no reason they can't be reused. But there are some other issues perhaps we could have a chat about outside the meeting. Very happy to do that.
Thank you very much, Julie. The next person I've got down is Councillor Bennett.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that the C3 food van is used quite heavily. I know residents from Abbey, from Coleridge and Sherry Hinton who use it. And it actually works very well because it means that we have a facility for residents on days when more local facilities are out of action. So I really welcome this application. The other thing I was actually going to say is that I agree with Julie that there are other funds that could be approached. I'm thinking particularly of the National Lottery Communities Under 10,000 Fund. And I'd welcome efforts to help residents to go for some of the less obvious funds. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bennett.
Councillor Pounds, would it be okay if I just respond to that, please?
Yes, please do. I beg your pardon. I should have asked you. Yes.
That's fine. And it was just that now I've actually got the C3 application in front of me, I can answer slightly less embarrassingly the original question and thank Councillor Bennett for supporting the application. It was just to say that the food and consumables was 5,200. The room hire for the main kitchen and auditorium is 18,200 and direct staff costings are 7,800. So the total cost of running this activity is over 31,000. So our contribution will be towards the food and the consumables and that element. So it's proportionately speaking, a relatively small amount of money over for a large activity, but I do appreciate it is actually a large chunk of funding for your area. So I hope that answers the original question. And also I'd just like to say, absolutely, we support community groups to find alternative sources of funding. For example, next week, I'm actually part of a programme called Support Cambridge Funding Week. And there are lots of different organisations that are available to discuss different grants that are available to groups in Cambridge City. I'm actually one of the presenters of our grant fund, but there are lots of others, and we work with CCVS to make sure that groups are aware of what's available. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julie. Do we have any other questions? I can't see any hands, or I think the chat is working now. At least the officers seem to be able to use it. Councillor Bajan, if you'd like to ask one more question, that's fine.
Yeah, I wonder if Julie could just repeat that so I could write it down. The breakdown of food costs.
Yeah. So food and consumables, that's 5,200. These are all very top line.
Yeah.
Room hire for the main kitchen and auditorium, that's 18,200. And the direct staff costs are 7,800. Yeah, so that comes to 31,200. So and they've obviously secured funding. Well, a huge portion will be from their reserves, but they secure funding from elsewhere to make the figures stack up.
So am I missing something here? If the food's being served from the van,
they have to prepare it, so they'll do that
so
in the main
kitchen.
18,200
on preparation charges, 7,800 on staff. Am I understanding that right?
Yes, but perhaps it might be better if we talked about it, so I can talk a bit more about the detail outside the meeting, if that would be acceptable. They're feeding over 100 people every Friday, for example, and that's increasing. So I think we've got to bear in mind the number of beneficiaries, and that's how we would work out value for money.
Yeah, I'm really appreciate that there's lots of people who need the food and are gaining the food, but 18,200 for room hire?
We're not funding that.
No, yeah. I know, but effectively somebody is.
Councillor Bajan, I think that this should be discussed outside this forum, if that's okay, and Julie's agreed to do that with you. So if you'd like to contact independently, I think that's for the best. Yeah, right. Anybody else have any other queries about the community grants and this? Interesting that we have a really high need in this area, more than double what was available.
Yes, yeah. Perhaps it's something that we could look at in future when we do the next phase of the community funding review. Because we use a formula, but this year the pressure on the north and the east in particular has been intense. So I think that's something we need to consider, you know, because there is such a demand in certain areas and less so in others. So that would be something I'd really like to bring back to councillors at some point.
That'd be great. Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks ever so much then. If everyone's happy. Oh, no, I've got one question from Hannah. Councillor Copley.
Sorry, I was just trying to unmute. Just to follow on from Councillor Bajan's question, I wonder, we've got the number of beneficiaries in the breakdown. Is this over like 1 year? So is that many people, plus possibly more, getting one meal once a week for 52 weeks? Just if we think about a kind of value for money, understand that those formulas have already been applied by yourself, Julie, but it doesn't allow us to actually see that, if that makes sense. Like it could be once, and then we'd be £31,000 for 122 people. But yeah, what's the time frame?
That would be for whatever they've expressed within their application, and in this instance, it will be for the whole financial, well, from the 7th of April to the 29th of 2023 to the 29th of March 2024. And what is good about this application, which we often don't get with others, is this is the number of beneficiaries. This is not the amount of time that people have visited to receive food. And what we find with quite often with applications is we get the number of instances, but actually what they're doing is looking at the number of beneficiaries. So some beneficiaries will come once and some will come every week, but they're actually only counting the number of individuals, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Do you mind if I just clarify that, Chair?
Yes, please do.
Yes, thank you. So I guess if that number of beneficiaries came every week, it comes out as just under £5 a meal, which seems like a very reasonable amount. Obviously, we're not quite sure whether it would be that amount, but it could be everybody only comes a couple of times. Obviously, people won't come every week, so you can imagine how it could seem the very bad value if not that many people were receiving the benefit from this.
Well, what we're told in the application, obviously we can only assess all these applications on what's in the application or any other supporting documents that they send, is typically they feed over 100 people every Friday. So that's a typical Friday. And then obviously the more the demand is there because the cost of living crisis, and the more it becomes advertised, you know, that demand's increasing.
Okay, thank you.
And obviously it's unlikely that people will come once at the moment because of the cost of living crisis.
Thank you very much. I think we will move on now, if that's okay. You can always email Julie, I think, if you have further queries. Thank you very much, Julie.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much for your hard work. Yeah. Right, we'd like to move on to item 6 now, agenda item 6, which is our environmental report. I'd like to welcome Wendy Johnson, who's the Community Engagement and Enforcement Manager, and she'll provide an update on the activities since you last attended. Welcome, Wendy.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm just going to keep the update very short and just draw your attention to a few key points from each ward, and then I'm more than happy to take any questions or comments that members may have. So this report brings about the activities across the East area from September last year to February this year. Due to the deadlines, it's kind of sort of the middle of February, sort of the figures go to. So one key thing we've had with our enforcement team is we have restructured the way that they cover the wards. So we have put the officers in wards where there is more need. That currently means that we have realigned officers in the Romsey and Petersfield wards predominantly, because that's where the highest levels of fly tipping and environmental crime currently are. So the split for those teams is now straight down the middle of Mill Road. So you have officers covering one side of Mill Road and another team of officers covering the other side. That will obviously help to enhance where officers are able to get to, in theory, sort of double the amount of coverage that certain hotspot areas are receiving. I think you'll see from the reports that they've been detailing a lot more of the work that they're dealing with. Within the Abbey ward, we've had quite a lot more illegal encampments across the 6-month period. That's quite an increase than we previously would have had. It's not been one particular area, it's been Stourbridge Common, Coldhams, Abbey Pool and Barnwell Nature Reserves as well. In the Coleridge ward, we've had a hotspot of fly tipping in the Pern Road area. Various different types of waste, and the enforcement team for that area are following up with fixed penalties or other enforcement action as appropriate. Within the Petersfield ward, we've had quite a lot of hotspots for Staffordshire Street, various different waste types being found dumped in and around the estate area, which they are targeting, working with the housing officers and the estate champions for that area as well. Within the Romsey ward, we also have a hotspot. Actually, it's more of an issue really of littering from motor vehicles. Most of our littering from a motor vehicle for this period has actually been in the Romsey ward, and people who have been identified most often are throwing cigarette ends from their windows, and that's being followed up with fixed penalty notices. So if I draw your attention to the data that's on page 45, that summarises the figures across the wards for the 6-month period. Going against the trend across the rest of the city, the fly tipping numbers in the east area have actually decreased. I'm not quite sure what that is. I don't really have an explanation for that because it's kind of opposite of what's happening across the rest of the city where the increases are more significant. So we've had a decrease in all wards apart from Coleridge, which has seen an increase, and Romsey, sorry. So yeah, Petersfield and Abbey have had decreases, fly tipping across the areas. And then, yeah, so your enforcement officers as sort of restructured are detailed on page 49. So if you need to contact them directly, their details are on that page, and they're more than happy to respond to any reports that come through about issues in their wards. And that's a really brief summary, Chair. I am more than happy to take any questions or comments about that.
Thank you very much, Wendy. So Councillor Bennett is first, followed by Councillor Boulat, followed by Councillor Cotley.
I just wanted to say just how appreciative we are of Wendy's team's efforts in Abbey. When we've been to the community clean-up days, we've noticed that officers are quite often staying late because of the sheer volume of things that residents are bringing. And we really do appreciate the special efforts they're going to. And we know that residents appreciate it because you get lots of positive feedback.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Councillor Boulat.
Thank you. Just want to say as well that I really welcome the work, especially around fly tipping. I still see there's quite a hot spot in the Fyson Road area. I know from residents that this is where we get a lot of the requests from as well. So I was wondering, like, if you notice any changes in particular in that Fyson Road area lately. And then in terms of your comment on the illegal tents and encampments on the green spaces, I was just wondering, like, how does the team signpost people after that, like because I'm wondering if any of this is related to the cost of living crisis, and how are we able to signpost people who are found in those situations in general? Because I had a couple of residents contacting me again about this as well, and they were quite worried about people spending time in some of the green spaces like that. Thank you.
Would you like to respond to that, Wendy?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So in terms of the Fyson Road fly tips, I haven't been notified of any changes in sort of the type of waste. It does vary from black sacks, where people have kind of maybe put out extra waste thinking it would be collected, It could be sort of furniture example, sort of furniture people have left thinking the council would take it away. We do also get a lot of the recycling centre abuse at that sort of particular area as well, but we've not noticed any distinctive pattern change recently that we can attribute to any particular reason. In terms of the illegal encampments, if we get notified there's an encampment, we do work with the street outreach team. So we will always signpost people to the street outreach team and also notify the street outreach team of where they can find an encampment. And they do great work in contacting people and signposting to the relevant options there are available. We also obviously will signpost them to facilities where they can access, wash facilities and accommodation as well, if they want to engage with us. Often, from an enforcement point of view, people would prefer to engage with sort of an alternative agency, just because we find if our job is to tell people they need to move on, they can't be camping on the open spaces. It's not always received as well as we might like, but we do work with obviously the street outreach team who undertake that work. And obviously the work that we do as well links in with the Street Life Working Group and the Street Support Officer that the council has as well. So if people ask us for information about how to access housing or anything like that, we do have the facility to be able to point them in the right direction. And if we can't answer their questions, we will always come back to them with the people that can help them. I hope that answers that question.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Copley.
Yeah, thank you very much for the report, Wendy. My two questions are quite similar to the first two. Obviously, the Fyson Road Thorpeway Estate is a real fly tipping hotspot. I wondered if you had or might be able to look at the timing of when the fly tips happened, because as Councillor Bennett said, the community cleanup days are so popular, and I wondered if we do get a drop or ending the fly tipping after that happens, because that potentially could mean that we should perhaps make them more often in that estate, was one suggestion. And the second was Councillor Boulat asked about people camping in green spaces in the context of the cost of living crisis, but is it yours and your team's opinion that this is people who are homeless, who are living on green spaces, or is it people camping there for recreation who do have other homes, as far as you know? And I know we had a very long-term resident on Ditton Meadows who camped there for a very long period of time, and that was kind of the permanent situation for a very long time. So, yeah, I guess I just want to share Councillor Boulat's concern that if we enforce somebody, we may signpost them to the right things, but we may, that if they're simply homeless, then they need to sleep somewhere that next night, etc. So, yeah, I want to share Councillor Boulat's concern about that.
Would you like to respond to this one, Wendy?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So yeah, in terms of Thorpeway Fyson Road, I can certainly look at the dates of when the fly tips are, if there are any hotspot particular times of year. I can work on that with Will Beavitt, who tends to run the cleanup days from City Homes in the area, and certainly look at whether the timing is anything we can look at improving. In terms of the encampments, I can't comment on the individual cases because obviously I don't deal with them myself. So I'm not exactly sure of everyone's specific circumstances. I know from experience that we do have a mixture of people. Some people that come into the city and want to camp, and we also obviously do deal with some homeless people as well, but we also have people that that choose to have a nomadic lifestyle, and that's how they choose to live. So it's a combination of sort of those three, and possibly other people from the cost of living crisis. I really can't go into specifics of cases, and I can't really make a sort of an opinion about what we're dealing with because I don't have the specifics of the cases in front of me to be able to give you that definitive answer, I'm afraid.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bagent is next.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Wendy, for the sterling work and very visible work that your team does for us. They are really our council in operation, and people see that. I'm just following. I was going to talk quite a lot about the people that are camping, and my concern was that they are offered alternative homes. if they're camping because they have nowhere else to live. And I think that you've sort of covered that to suggest they're passed on to other agencies, so we don't just tip them off and leave them to fend for themselves, which I'm again grateful for. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bajan. Did you want to respond, Wendy?
No, I think
we've covered that one. Yeah, great. Councillor Davey, I've got next.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Dinah. I suspect you'll hear this from other people as well, Wendy, but I wonder if a special priority be given to Mill Road Cemetery at the moment. There's considerable concerns about what's been happening there, which I'm sure you'll be aware of in terms of graffiti and damage. And it's just to try and be proactive in the cemetery if at all possible. And that will probably require contact with other people within different teams within the City Council just to make sure things are kept up to date. And it's just, also I do appreciate how busy your team are. It would be very good if we could keep Mill Road Cemetery as a high priority at the moment. Thank you very much, Councillor Pounds.
Would you like to respond, Wendy?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my other team that I manage is a community engagement team, and we actually are the lead team that contact the Friends of group. So we do have quite a lot of contact with the relevant groups for Mill Road Cemetery. You do have 2 enforcement officers that also cover that area now as well, and I know they're down Mill Road on a weekly basis. I mean, kind of, we are aware of the issues. I think they've been quite well publicised in the local media. So certainly, I'll relay to officers if they could make sure that that's kind of a hotspot area in the coming period. Certainly,
that'd be helpful. If you could if I could do a quick follow up, Dinah, if you could keep Richard, Katie, Thorber, and myself up to speed, that'd be really helpful, so we can respond back to people's concerns. Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Pounds.
Thank you. And Councillor Morris next.
Thank you. I want to echo everyone's thanks to Wendy and the team, and just to say, sorry, I can't remember who, I think it was Councillor Copley said about fly tipping and the community clear up days. So Don Blair has looked into this. And unfortunately, across the city, there's absolutely no correlation. It seems that the people that want to fly tip, and the people that want to do the right thing, do the right thing. So it seems that it doesn't make an impact on fly tipping, but nevertheless, it is a really good community resource, and lots of residents, as you say, is really popular and lots of residents do use them. But it's unfortunate, but there we go. Thank you. So I just encourage all residents to use the community clear up days or our bulky waste disposal, or take things to the dump yourself. Please do not fly tip. It's a criminal offence and makes our city dirty and unsightly, and gives our officers unnecessary work to do when they've got lots of other things to be getting on with. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. I just wanted to add my voice to that, Wendy, that we have an issue in Romsey under the Carter Bridge by the station in William Smith Close, which is appalling. It's a drug den, basically, and we are in the process of getting it sealed off. But I was really pleased that last week, but the residents contact me quite regularly to say how bad the needles and the debris is in the space, and your team came within the same day, to clear up, which was fantastic. Just to raise a little issue that's perhaps slightly not so related, but I have mentioned this to Councillor Moore. I was approached by somebody who said that it's really difficult for people who work with sort of garden clearance, house clearance, or small jobs to get their waste disposed of, because they have to take it up to Amy's on the A10, and it's not easy, because from south of Cambridge, you've got to travel across Cambridge, or round Cambridge, and he asked if it would be possible to have a place for commercial waste at the Whittlesford recycling centre, so that they didn't have to travel all the way so far with their waste. Now, I wonder if, when I spoke to Councillor Moore, I realised that this is a county council issue, not a city council issue, because they're the ones who dispose of the waste. But whether that would, whether that's the same issue with the fly tipping, that the waste has to go so far, and so the alternative is, oh well, we'll fly tip then and take the risk, because it's negotiating the traffic, etc., up to the top of the A10 is too much effort.
Yes, I mean, it is quite possible that people think it's going too far to go to Milton Tip. However, there is also the Thriplow household waste recycling centre as well that they can use, located out towards Duxford. So there are 2 recycling centres that are sort of within the close boundary to the city that could be used. People come up with all sorts of reasons for why they might fly tip. I think we get all sorts of excuses and reasons that people give to us as enforcement officers. I think kind of the household waste recycling centres are very clearly publicised what people can take there, where they can go. So I'm not really sure why people feel it's too far to travel. There are so many options available to people to dispose of waste responsibly and legally. Alternatives.
The Thriplow Centre doesn't take commercial waste, so if you're actually running a little business, that's, I think, possibly where there is an issue if it's a small firm or a one-man firm. Whether that, it might be worth looking into, mightn't it? Yeah.
I think it is a county council issue, like you said.
Yeah.
Just to add in about the needles at Carter Bridge, just to say that if anyone comes across any needles or drugs paraphernalia, if they report it online via a web form, our team works 7 days a week and they will respond to needles. They aim to respond within an hour to pick them up from notification. So if anyone reports them via the web form, we will respond as quickly as we can, including the weekends as well.
That's really brilliant. That's great to know. Did anybody else want to raise any points here?
Please, I'm on the list.
Councillor Robertson, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yes, thank you, Wendy. Great stuff, I must say. I was recently talking to somebody on the doorstep who's just moved to Cambridge, and they were really pleased at the cleanliness of the streets compared with where they had been. I won't tell you where they had been, but it was awful. I was going to ask you about another campaign you've got, which is bins off streets. I think this is to do with getting people to put their bins away, but it is relevant to fly tipping, because if bins are left on the street, other people passing by tend to use them, and then they overflow and they become a fly tip. So can you tell us a bit about the bins off streets campaign?
Yeah, of course. So what you may have noticed, particularly in the Romsey and Petersfield area, is some of the bins have got yellow and black stickers on them now saying keep your bins off the streets. Under the law, basically, there's a requirement for people to keep their bins within the curtilage of their property, whether that be a front garden, a back garden, or whatever facilities they've got. Bins shouldn't be left on the streets for any reason. Obviously, we have to apply the legislation specifically to the areas we're looking at. What our officers have been targeting is predominantly, to start with, the areas off of Mill Road, where we get the highest volume of bins, particularly when they accumulate around areas such as St Philip's Road, for example. When you get large volumes of them, some of them often can be abandoned or left. So what we're doing is we will apply a notice to a bin if it's left out, making, particularly where the ones are not got property numbers on, so we can try and trace where the bins go to. If they don't get removed, we'll then follow the process that the shared waste service use, and we'll apply a notice to the bin with our intention to remove it. And I think so far we've removed about 20 or 30 bins that have just been left out and are not being used. It's because of the sheer volume of bins and obviously the large area that we have to cover. It's kind of an ongoing campaign. We started with 3 sort of dedicated weeks earlier in the year, and we're continuing throughout the year, targeting the different roads. They're trying to do sort of 2 or 3 roads at a time, because there's a lot of work to stick in the bins and follow it up. If it gets to the point where people are just refusing to comply and not taking the bins off, and they've clearly got gardens or areas they can store them, then we can follow through with notices requiring them to do so. It's quite a lengthy process, because it's actually been decriminalised by central government. It's now a civil offence. So it takes a lot of work and a lot of effort, but the stickers are the first step because it helps us to make it quite visible about what people must do with their bins. So the work started this year, and it's an ongoing part of work that will be continuing throughout the year to try and tackle the problem. I hope that makes it a bit clearer.
It does. Thank you very much. That's really good. And of course, getting the bins off the streets helps with prams and wheelchairs. It's all a great move. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much for that answer, Wendy. Anybody else now? Any other questions? No, I think we've answered everything. Thank you very much for that report, Wendy, and again, we really appreciate the work that you and your teams are doing. It's great. Thank you. So we move on now to item 7, which is our open forum. So we have 2 questions this evening, and this session will last 30 minutes unless we deem it we need longer. But we have 2 questions now, so I'd like to welcome Anthony. Welcome. If you would like to ask your questions, Anthony.
Crikey, you've given me a whole 30 minutes. That's dangerous.
No. The forum will last 30 minutes.
Right, so question number 1 relates to the Fanshawe Road development, where I met Councillor Moore at the Cambridge Scout Hut at the weekend, which I hadn't been into since about 1990, so I'm kind of showing my age. And in the grand scheme of things, I actually welcome the proposals that you've got there. And I'm also mindful that on the other side of Coleridge Rec, where Karina, former Councillor O'Reilly, installed the Dragon Slide, which I had nothing to do with, you've got the almost identical design of flats and urban design, which are likely to be the next ones to go based on the age of the design of the buildings and the buildings that they're made of. And so given that next door, close to the railway line, you've got the proposed eastern entrance to Cambridge railway station that's going to come with the east-west rail development, I wanted to almost kind of put a marker down to a blog post that I wrote back in June last year, basically seeing if we could extend the size of Coleridge Rec effectively by redesigning and repurposing Davy Road so it goes around the edge of the site boundary of the flats, enabling us to create a larger pavilion for both the bowling club and park users, and also as part of that incorporating more safer and secure cycle parking, and also incorporating a traffic noise reducing wall or barrier that has foliage planted on either side, to reduce the traffic noise coming from Coleridge Road, which actually is surprisingly annoying, in particular in the summer. And I just wanted to see whether, when it comes to doing that next bit, could all of those things be, I guess, coordinated with each other so that the end result we end up with is something that's greater than the sum of its parts. Mindful that when both developments are completed, the Davy Road and the Fanshawe Road ones, you will have increased the population density of both of those sites. And so given how heavily the park is used, in particular during the summer, I think there's a case for possibly extending the park just by changing the layout of the road.
Thank you very much, Anthony. And it's great that you've brought this up. It's going to be quite a complex one because obviously when you're going cross authorities, cross purpose, in that the East West Rail will have a different agenda from the City Council and possibly from the County Council. Now, is there a councillor who's involved at all with any of this who feels they would like to respond to Anthony? Councillor Moore, thank you.
Shall I respond?
Yes,
Thank
please
you,
do.
Anthony. I agree with you. You had some great ideas at the consultation. Officers are looking into them. More about if the park can be extended. But obviously, we're quite a long way off those proposals. The suggestion of some noise barriers, part of the work on the flats for Fanshawe Road, the S106 money will be spent on improving facilities in Coleridge Rec. So having improving / changing the bowling green pavilion and having maybe a cafe and some other areas. So putting in a barrier or even just planting hedges is something that would be possible in the short term. So we will be looking into that. The other suggestions have been noted, but we're not obviously doing anything with the other flats at this moment, and we don't have any plans to currently. And also the eastern access to the station, there's no current plans for that. But I would urge you, Anthony, to complete the consultation on the Fanshawe flats if you didn't already when you came, and also anyone else who's here, please respond, because it's there will be real improvements to the local area with more open space, more open space, and as I say, the improvements in the park as well as increased housing. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. That sounds very, very interesting. I think Anthony realised that green spaces are a very high priority for the council, and we'll be very keen to follow through on this sort of thing. Councillor Smith is next.
I didn't actually have my hand up, but I did very temporarily, but then Rosie answered it very expertly, and I've not got a lot to add, but I will answer the next one when we get round to that one.
Thank you. Right. Has anybody got any information about the East West Rail? It seems to be chugging along very slowly. Councillor Shayler, can you shed any light on any progress?
Yeah, I doubt that I can shed any light, but it is still going. It hasn't been cut. It is still there. And as Anthony said, and it looks like he might have been thinking about this for a bit, but it is part of their proposal to open it to the east. But there are no. I haven't seen any detailed proposals just how or what the requirement is when they do open it to the east.
Thank you. So does anybody else have anything to add for this question?
I did just a little bit of historical background. The proposal for an eastern entrance dates back to about 1909, and the most detailed ones actually date back to Holford Wright in his 1950 proposals, as Lewis has been on the receiving end of various social media posts by me saying, this is the map, when are we going to get it? As well as another footbridge. I mean, that for me is actually a kind of a wider thing, and it will touch sort of on the second question about having easily available in places where residents and councillors can find some of the essential things on our local history, where we can actually look back at previous proposals and, you know, work out the reasons why we didn't get them, and then obviously as and when circumstances change and central governments change, it might be possible that some of the things that we can't get now, maybe further along down the line, will be things that we can actually be able to pull back. I mean, mindful, for example, with the Davy Road proposals that I've mentioned, as things stand now, obviously there's no way that you can make a comment or a commitment on that. This is something that's going to be for, you know, when those buildings ultimately come to the end of their lives, and as and when you get funding for them. the point that I want to put on public record is here are some things to consider now, so that when it comes to design stage, you've already got those things there, rather than coming back to them at the last minute and finding that actually it's too expensive to change them, as I've seen on far too many other programs. But then I've been following the Greater Cambridge Partnership for the best part of 7 years, so I've almost got as much patience as Lewis on that one, or Councillor Herbert even. But that's me done.
Thank you very much. Well, and thank you for raising this. I think you should feel reassured that it's in people's minds, and as I say, green spaces are very important to us. So as we chug forward slowly, hopefully that this will all come together. So you have a second question, Anthony?
I do. The second question, and again, I threw in a blog post link on it, and it relates to the event that you had in 2021, and the programme of brass bands in the park that unfortunately Coleridge Rec wasn't selected in 2022. But as you, for those of you who have seen the blog post and the blog post link, we had about 200 people there, but what we didn't have in addition to that were kind of like refreshment stalls and a greater presence of community groups, and I felt that that was a little bit of a missed opportunity given the demographic of people who were there. You had lots of parents with young children there. It wasn't just the elderly there who, for example, Councillor Moore mentioned the Coleridge Community Forum, of which I'm a member as well. I should also declare that I'm also a member of Cambridge Acorn as well. And I just felt it was, if we're going to do the same again with the brass bands in the park, one, please can Coleridge Rec be one of those parks that's used, because I often feel we get left out of a lot of these events, and this is one of the rare opportunities that we get to bring people from around the neighbourhood together. And then secondly, can we invite not just neighbourhood and community groups, but some of the citywide groups to put out stalls and say, look, we are here, and we are campaigning on some of the issues that you may be interested in, to not just improve the neighbourhood, but to improve our city. And I think in the longer term, I'm particularly interested to see how Coleridge Community College can be utilised, in particular their students, to see whether they can, put on or help organise some of the events to make use of the rec during the summer. Things like arts festivals that we used to see in the last millennium, I think it was, we used to have things like that where the schools would play a prominent part of that. And it's something that, I would like to see that coming back, if anything, because it teaches the children that the council exists and how to get involved in decision making in democracy, which my generation, sadly, because of austerity, we never had that opportunity.
Thank you very much. It's an absolutely brilliant idea, and I mean, you're right. People of my generation, we grew up, and this was quite commonplace. That the major parks of the whole borough always had a summer fete and bands and community activities, and it would be lovely. I agree. Now, I'm not absolutely sure, and Councillor Smith will direct me, but I think this probably comes under Councillor Collis's remit.
It does. So I've had a chat with her already and can pass on a few things. So
thank you.
First of all, Anthony, yeah, I mean, personally, if it was down to me, I think we'd want the rec every year. We do obviously have to share the love a bit around the city. So I know from when this was in my remit that the aim is to try and make sure that there is something in each part of the city, and particularly not just as it used to be the case, everything focused in on the central parks. And there's been a really big effort in previous years, and I think it's great to spread that out right around the city, so those things are really in people's neighbourhoods, and I think that's really important. It was really interesting idea around whether we could get the local schools more involved in this kind of thing. I mean, I'm thinking of the amazing contribution that Parkside Create makes to the Mill Road Fair, and they're always there leading with the carnival band. It's just fantastic. So I will certainly pass that on as well to Councillor Collis around whether some of the local schools can be approached to contribute to the music. The short answer from Councillor Collis is sounds really interesting. She'll talk to officers and start that conversation up about how that kind of thing can be woven into what we're doing. So it's short but hopefully positive.
Right. Just to follow up, thank you, Councillor Smith. The real theme that from this that I want to get across to councillors is instead of seeing these as one-off, and I think this also comes down to the sponsorship issues and how to secure funding in an era of austerity from all of the wealth that we are constantly told by ministers that Cambridge makes, even though they continue to deny the City Council the powers to actually tax any of that wealth and spend it on civic things, is to get into or develop a culture and a routine of where there is a civic expectation for the firms that make their wealth into the city to feed that money in, not just on their own bespoke projects, but have the kind of a long-term agreement with the council to say, for example, over X number of years we will fund the brass bands in the park, and over those 5 years, that, or however many years, that's what will be delivered. In exactly the same way, they could support the schools with contributions, whether it's in cash or in kind, for them to, again, to take part in a routine annual manner, so that, you know, I mean, it was one of the things that we did at primary school, but we didn't have at secondary school because John Major cut the funding, where it became routine. It became part of our civic expectation as children that this is what would happen. And I think once you build that expectation, and you know, within a neighbourhood, within a community, and also within a city, the population generally becomes much more positively disposed towards that. And I think that's particularly important in a city that has a high turnover of population. I'll leave it there, but I'll just leave you with those thoughts.
Thank you very much. That's a very, very good thought.
Can I just say, Councillor Pounds, absolute music to my ears, Anthony. I think it's so important. We're a city that attracts a lot of big companies and wealthy companies, and there are those companies who get really involved in supporting the life of our city, and I wouldn't want to diminish that contribution, but the reality remains that we have a lot of people, particularly young people, who do not feel that they are getting any benefit from these large international companies being here. And the more we can encourage companies to play a full part in the life of our community and supporting our communities, the better. So I don't think you'll have anyone in this room that will be disagreeing with you. You're definitely preaching to the choir here. So, but thank you. It's always important to have that.
Just to quickly add, in my experience of, and it was one of the reasons why I was glad to leave Cambridge in the 1990s, was that there was not that expectation. We were taught absolutely nothing about what the councils did, who our councillors were. It just wasn't there. You know, and we're talking about a time, Anna, where you were a teacher and I was one of the students at the, you know, at Hills Road back in those days, and it's something obviously I feel particularly strongly about, because I don't want this generation of teenagers to go through what my generation went through, and where you had an entire cohort basically saying, glad we left, and most of them never came back.
I think your generation suffered from the mantra of the government of the time, which was there's no such thing as community, if you recall, Mrs. Thatcher, but I think really is an important part now of what we do as councillors, because not least because central government is cutting funding all the time. So we're reaching out for other means of funding, and this is the perfect way to go forward. So thank you for airing that, and be assured that it's something that we all have an intention of following as far as possible. So thank you very much, Anthony.
Thank you.
Very, very useful. Thank you. Does anybody now have any other issues that they would like to raise, discuss amongst councillors? Anything else to do with the area that is of concern? No, I think then we are done. Thank you ever so much, everybody, for your contributions tonight, and some really useful discussion there. And again, thank you to our officers, Wendy and Julie, for really excellent reports and for a clear explanation of what's going on with the grants and with the environmental issues. So if everybody has I know I've got to give you a date. Oh, the next meeting is the 22nd of June, which is scheduled. And I believe we were also sent all the dates for next year and asked to check if if there are any clashes. So it would be appreciated, I think, if you could just do that and let Chris Connor know if there's any issues that he's not been able to pick up. Other than that, I wish you a very good evening. Thank you very much for your contribution, and we'll no doubt see you again soon. Thanks. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Good night.